All rise for the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Board of Education meeting. This is a work session. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the Ann Hutch and Greenvale PTAs for their work for this weekend's Sweetheart Dance. And in addition, like I said, this is a work session. We have our contractors here to give us an update. Okay. And finally, I'd just like to thank our district clerk, Lori Parada, for all the hard work that she did in getting board docs operational. We apologize for any strife or distress that the issue has caused to the community for the fact that the agenda was not timely posted. So without further ado, Dr. Valenti, we'll start with our presentations.
So I'd like to begin tonight, members of the board and members of the community, with the first item, if my machine behaves and moves forward. Why is the slide not moving forward, Mr. Jacoby? There we go. Thank you, Robert. We'd like to recognize a member of the Eastchester staff. As you could see in the PowerPoint, Elizabeth Bruni won the Lower Hudson Regional Information Center Award, Transforming Education Through Leading and Learning, for outstanding innovation as a teacher. Elizabeth is a middle school teacher. And award winners demonstrated an outstanding, innovative, and strategic approach to technology integration in their school and district. Nominees were considered from school districts throughout the Lower Hudson region. And I would remind everyone that the Lower Hudson region is a very large region. We are 75 school districts, so winning an award as one among 75 districts is extremely prestigious. She will be honored at the March 6th ceremony at the Edith Macy Conference Center in Briarcliff, New York, but we wanted to take advantage of honoring her tonight first. So Elizabeth, will you come join us here at the podium? Let's give her a big round of applause. And could I ask your principal, Madeline LeBou, to come forward? Congratulations, Elizabeth. And Robert, our Director of Technology. Yeah. And would you like to say a few words, Madeline and Robert? And then we'll ask Liz to say a few words.
I'll allow Mr. Jacoby to explain more of where the origins of the award, but I can tell you that when he made the administration aware of this opportunity to nominate staff, clearly we immediately thought of Elizabeth. She has been instrumental in digitizing many of our systems within the middle school, including our morning announcement system that we can now submit morning announcements digitally, and among other things. And of course, she's also been instrumental in recreating and writing our STEM curriculum, specifically our coding curriculum at the middle school. So we are very appreciative that she's been recognized through this award.
Robert? Sure.
This is definitely very exciting. Just to put it into perspective, last year, 5 teachers in almost 100 districts receive this award. So from a technology education perspective, this is the holy grail of our region. Liz is our new educational technology facilitator. She's the go-to at the middle school. She helps us pilot programs. Right now, we're looking at iPads in the middle school for coding curriculum. She is motivated. She's helpful, friendly. Her fellow teachers trust her. So we're really, I'm very honored. I've never worked with a Tel Award recipient. So congrats, Liz.
Liz, would you like to say a few words?
Sure.
Please, yeah, good.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you for the words. It's really just such an honor to receive this award. I'm still kind of shocked about it myself. It hasn't even like registered with me at all. When they told me, I was just so shocked. I was like, what? I didn't even know I was up for the award until about a week or so ago. But I'm just very grateful to have been nominated and very grateful to receive the award for the district. Thank you, guys.
Let's take a photo, okay?
Oh, photo, okay.
Michael would like a Kodak moment with you, your principal and Robert. Oh. Okay, thank you. Another round of applause. So on that note, we will move to the capital bond project update with Aris Construction. And let me start by asking Elliot if he would come up and do the honors of introducing our representative from Aris. Elliot? Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Mr. Scott Hilge from Aris Contracting will be presenting tonight on our current capital project update.
Thank you.
And you're comfortable with this, right?
Hopefully. There we go. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here to give you an update on your 2022 capital bond project. As Elliot mentioned, I'm Scott Hilge with Aris Contracting, the construction managers for your projects. We're going to give you a brief overview of the phases, and then we'll give you a little bit more detail on each of the phases as we move through. So, regarding the overall schedule and budget, I'm happy to report that overall we are doing really well to date. We have completed phase 1, and that was on budget, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Moving forward, phase 2, we are nearing completion summers. So we completed some of the work in the summer of 2024, and we will be finishing the rest of the work this coming summer. Some of the work, and we'll talk a little bit more, is ongoing currently in the building, second shift. Phase 4, we just recently awarded, or you awarded, the contracts for the general construction, the mechanical construction, and the electrical construction. We are going to rebid the plumbing construction. So we'll be coming back to you with a recommendation regarding the plumbing. And then we're already making plans to move that project forward to start during this school year, and it will continue on during the summer of 2025. And then we'll talk about the future work that will round out all of the projects that were approved for the 2022 bond. So the phase 1 project, which was upgrades to the fields and the parking lot here at the high school, it included stormwater improvements, it included the high school baseball and softball field improvements, and parking and pavement improvements at the high school. So we completed that work in March of 2023. There is some ongoing concerns that the district has, and so district is working through those, and you'll be hearing more about that in future meetings. And we provided some of the shots showing the completed work. Phase 2 of the project concentrated on safety and security issues at the various schools. So there were upgrades to security entrance vestibules, upgrades to surveillance, access controls, intrusion detection systems, and enhancements to the public address system. The project also included replacements of exterior doors, interior doors, and it also included new door hardware that allows for a lockdown system. The project included upgrades to exterior lighting for safety and security, and we also completed some of the abatement work for the high school and the middle school that was associated with that phase and some other phases. So we started the work in June of 2023. It continued on in July of 2024, and we are wrapping up this phase 2 project currently. So we are basically substantially complete. There are some few outstanding items that we are addressing with the contractor, but we will be closed out by the end of this school year with that project complete. And some of the upgrades that we did at the various vestibules at the schools, creating a secure environment entering the building. Here at the high school, right outside the door here. And then phase 3 was concentrated at the high school and the middle school, as well as some of the work, preliminary work at Ann Hutch. So at the high school, we did a bunch of abatement work. We are converted the steam boilers to hot water boilers, replaced on the middle school side so far the unit ventilators in classrooms. We did upgrades to ceilings and lighting through the corridors and in classrooms. This project is ongoing, so we completed the middle school and some of the work in Ann Hutch regarding abatement and running some of the piping in the summer of 2024. So we just finished that up, and that prepares us to finish the project at Ann Hutch in phase 4, which will be finishing the piping, installing new unit ventilators, and several other upgrades that we'll talk about. We'll continue on in the high school for phase 3. We'll be doing upgrades in the classrooms on the high school side, including unit ventilators, which will bring in the fresh air, and eventually we'll be putting cooling into the building. And that work is scheduled for this coming summer. And some of the upgrades, unit ventilators, ceilings and lighting. A lot of the stuff that most of you don't ever see, but it's really important to get these upgrades done in the boiler rooms. And then phase 4, the project that we're just starting to kick off. It includes upgrades to the toilet rooms at the high school, including ADA improvements at Ann Hutchinson. We're going to complete the abatement work. So we did some of the abatement work as part of phase 3. We're going to complete it in phase 4. We're going to complete the heating and cooling upgrades. We're going to put a new electric service into the building, and we're also completing auditorium renovations, including mechanical upgrades, new ceilings, and some of the aesthetic upgrades in that building. So as I mentioned earlier, we did award the contracts for GC, MC, and EC. We're going to go out to bid for the plumbing to make sure that we have competitive bidding for that. And we're going to start work on the second shift during the school year to start running more of the piping. And so that will put us in a good position to finish the work during the summertime. So we'll be, as soon as you're finished with your school year, we'll be moving into the building with the contractors, and we'll be finishing that off. That will be substantially complete by the end of the summer. I should mention the auditorium is actually planned to go into the school year into October because of the amount of work that's required in that space. And then to wrap up your 2022 bond, we have Phase 5. So this is going to start the planning process very soon, and that includes upgrades at various locations throughout the district, middle school toilet rooms and locker rooms, ADA upgrades in those facilities is currently planned for the summer of 2027. We'll be doing more work at Greenvale, including replacing the exterior wall, what we call the curtain wall, at the annex part of the building. That's also coupled with putting new unit ventilators into that part of the building. And then we will also be replacing those systems in the rest of the building. We'll be doing heating and air conditioning systems for the entire building, toilet room renovations, some site upgrades, ceilings and lighting like we have done here, and then electric service room upgrades, and we'll be upgrading the electric panels. At Waverly, similar, we're going to be working on that in the summer of 26 and 27 because of the size of the project. We'll be spanning 2 summers. Again, we'll be doing heating and air conditioning upgrades for the entire building, toilet room renovations, site improvements for ADA parking, classroom and ceiling lighting upgrades, electric panel replacements. We're going to be converting the existing steam boilers to hot water, and we'll be installing a backflow preventer for the water coming in. Oh, and let's just wrap. Yes, and that's the summer of 26 and 27, and that will round out your 2022 bond project. So, any questions for us?
So not so much a question, but I know we're going to look back on this meeting on February 4th, and I just want to highlight very quickly air conditioning in all of the buildings. As the summer approaches, we receive a lot of emails about the temperature in the buildings and what are we doing about putting air conditioning in. So I just want to publicly state as we look back on this meeting, this upcoming summer and next summer, this was all taken into consideration. It's outlined here in the phases in terms of having air conditioning throughout the buildings. So we're working on it, and just so everyone understands, and Elliot, perhaps you could just explain briefly, things here based on New York State education law, how we go out to bid, it's not as simple as saying we want to put air conditioning in the building and then in 3 months the air conditioning is automatically in the building. So maybe if you could just talk very briefly about the process, as briefly as you can, to get to the phases and why, because I'm sure some people here in the audience or at home are looking at this and saying, wow, phase 5 is 2 years from now based on a bond that was passed, 5 years prior. So I think if you could just highlight a little bit that process and why it takes this amount of time, I think that could be helpful.
Certainly. So,
Thank you, Elliot.
Scott could jump in too, but as you saw, as we went through the presentation, there's a major component to each building, and that's the electrical service upgrade. So you'll see at the elementary schools specifically, Ann Hutch and Greenvale will need electrical service upgrades, and Waverly too. So part of that is a design process and a phased approach that we, as a district, agreed upon when we voted on this project in 2022. Part of it was, obviously, we have a high level of use in our buildings year-round, including the summers. So we looked at it as a group at that time. Honestly, I wasn't here as part of it, but Eris was here and the design team and the Board of Education. And they came up with a plan that made the most sense. So at the time, the safety and security of the students was the first priority. So the earlier phases of the project, other than the field, were related to safety and security. So phase 2 and 3, 2 primarily, is all the security vestibules. You'll notice the new doors on the lock, or the locks on the doors as you walk through the building. And what that's allowed us to do is then, design these other phases for the future summers to come. And obviously, you know, it's not realistic for the district to take on 75 million in one summer. It would be insane. So I think, you know, realizing that we had a phased approach and this is part of it, we're doing everything we can to do temporary measures in the meantime for these other buildings. But we're really gonna rely heavily on those electrical upgrades at the elementary schools to help support the air conditioning in the buildings.
Great, and I would just add, very briefly, just, you know, again, for everyone and as folks look back on this meeting, of all of the phases so far, we're either at or below budget, which is very important in terms of how these professionals are managing this project and managing the phases to ensure that we're coming in at or below what's budgeted is very important, because I'm sure as anyone at home or here watching knows, you start to do a project and very quickly that creep can happen if you're not on top of it, and those costs can escalate pretty quickly. So thank you both very much for managing those dollars successfully and keeping us below budget.
Eris has done a great job with that.
You too, Elliot.
Thank you.
I have Sure. Just one quick question. I don't see Ann Hutch on the Phase 5, but if I recall correctly, Ann Hutch will also be receiving air conditioning in Phase 5. Is that correct?
No, phase four.
Oh, Phase 4.
This summer.
Okay.
all classrooms.
So Ann Hutch is not part of Phase 5 at all? They're done in Phase
Correct.
4? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
By the end of this summer, it will be Ann Hutch, the middle school and the high school will have air conditioning.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you all, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Okay. So, we'd like to talk to you tonight about some changes for the 6 to 12 schedule. Both Chris Welch and Madeline LeBoux are here to represent the secondary leadership. They brought with them some of their staff and some students, and they'd like to talk to the board about a 2-year bridge, a proposal that would deliver for next September a specific deliverable that they'll talk about, and then what we could look forward to in the second year for the future. So without any further ado, let's bring Chris and Madeline and whoever else. Let's introduce everybody, the whole crowd. And would you do the honors, Mr. Welch, and introduce our team here?
Absolutely. Good evening. So I'm excited to be presenting tonight. We have a really robust scheduling committee that we've put together. I'll talk a little bit about what the composition looks like in a minute, but tonight we have obviously Madeline LeBoux, middle school principal. Dr. Bill Myers also on the committee. He's here as well. We have Brian Johnson, who is the English department chairperson and ETA vice president. We also have our director of counseling, Heather Riley. And we have 2 students with us as well, 11th grade student Eva Musachenko and 10th grader Yael Zhu. And both of them have really been very vocal and open in representing the student perspective throughout this process. So, thank you for being here. Thank you. So again, just thanks to you for allowing us to be here tonight to present on this work. You know, certainly when I accepted the position as principal of the high school, this was one of several initiatives that I was really excited to be a part of leading. And certainly the work to this point has been rewarding. And I look forward to seeing where the work continues and how it progresses as we continue to strive to provide students with the best possible experience here at the high school. I also want to thank Dr. Valenti for the many conversations and collaborative conversations, I should say, we've had about the schedule in the past several months. So first, a little bit about the scheduling committee, who was on it, when we've met, the work we've done. It really is a very strong committee. Sometimes when you reach out for volunteers, you don't necessarily get a representative group or people who are invested in the work, but in this case, we certainly have. It's a committee that has undertaken the work with openness and a collaborative spirit of inquiry. They've expressed diverse opinions, which really has allowed us to consider multiple perspectives while making sure we keep students at the center of everything that we do. So as you can see on this slide, there's administrators from high school and middle school, central office administrators, students, ETA leadership, department chairs, and teachers from several different departments. And to date, we've met 3 times, November 4th, December 16th, and January 27th. So before I get into our timeline, and this will be further discussed in the presentation, I just want to talk a little bit about this idea of a change process, because that's what we're trying to do here. When we talk about the change process, typically there are what people would call adaptive changes and transformational changes. Adaptive changes tend to be smaller, incremental, that organizations adopt to address things that arise over time. Transformational changes, on the other hand, are large in scale and scope, and they involve major shifts in structure, mission, or processes. So when we're looking to make a transformational change like this, certainly a change to the high school schedule, which has been in effect for many, many years, it would be transformational. You really seek to have a deliberate collaborative process. So we certainly have viewed making the transformational change, as Dr. Valenti said, as a 2-year process. But given the fact that there was significant and strong work done before I got here related to the schedule, we believe that we can make some adaptive changes in the meantime, which will help us create a bridge schedule for next year, the 25-26 year, that addresses stated priorities and is reflective of some of the feedback that we have received through the surveys that we've administered, which we'll go through in a little bit. But more on that later, because first I just want to take you through some of the work that we have done to date as our committee. So a basic sketch of our timeline: we met for the first time in early November. We worked to establish norms and committee objectives. Later in November, we administered teacher surveys, conducted the survey, collected the responses, analyzed the data. At our mid-December meeting, again, we reviewed the teacher survey data, and we started to explore and analyze different schedules in the area. In January, we sent out student and parent surveys, again, analyzed that data, and were able to discuss it at a later meeting in January. Also in January, we began discussions about how we might incorporate, some of the feedback, some of the priorities from last year into a schedule for next year, and kind of think about a more immediate plan. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. Last week, we had our 3rd meeting. Again, we reviewed the data from parents and students. We talked about the possible schedule you'll see tonight. And then February, here we are at the board workshop presentation. So in our very first meeting, we created a very clear goal and objectives. That goal is to explore, evaluate, and propose alternative scheduling options that will best meet the needs of students, staff, and the broader school community. And those objectives are listed there for you. But really, I think what we want to focus on is this idea of considering the impact on student learning, staff experience, and certainly community needs. We moved forward, and this is, I think, an important point. Renowned author Simon Sinek reminds us to always start with why when tackling complex issues. He's written extensively on how starting with why can unleash the power of purpose and allows organizations to inspire action and create lasting impact, and that is exactly what we're seeking to do. So we started with why. Why change? Why are we considering alternatives? Certainly some challenges in the current system. There's a lack of flexibility. So some of the programming that we want to implement here, when you have a 9-period day where every day is the exact same, it's challenging to do that. Limits of the period length, 40 minutes is good, but a little bit more probably would allow us to do some of the problem-based, project-based, in-depth learning that we're really looking to see flourish here. And then the other kind of challenge is when the same period meets the same time every day. So if you have a first period math class, first period looks a lot different than fourth period, which looks a lot different than ninth period. So when it's fixed, that has an impact as well. I just want to talk a little bit about one of the educational goals we're seeking to align more with, and that is an idea we've spoken about quite a bit at the high school this year in our faculty meetings through the observation cycle, and that is LATIC, LATIC, which stands for Learner Active Technology Infused Classrooms. And the goal there is to actually embed technology within authentic learning opportunities and not just to use it for the sake of saying we use technology in this lesson. It's not just to say let's open a laptop and write an essay or complete this worksheet, but it is to have students using a myriad of technological tools that really foster the collaborative learning that we want to see. And then, of course, why are we considering bullet 3? A number of external factors, obviously increased student mental health needs, advisory, and concerns over the utilization of extra help. Both of those were stated priorities from work that was done previously. We moved forward to talk about the different levers that you can pull on if you want to adjust the schedule. These are the things you can adjust. The length of the school day. We were very clear, given the impact on busing, contractual obligations, that we were not really looking to do anything with the school day. You can look at the number of days in a cycle. Some have 5 for the 5 days of the week. We currently have 6, as it shows in this chart. We've examined schedules as a group that have as many as 10 days in a cycle. The length of the instructional period, again, currently we have 40. We viewed schedules that have 50, 55, 60, 70, 90. It's really all about what works for your academic program. Of course, if you're going to move and pull on that lever of the length of the period, you're going to have to change the number of periods in the day. So obviously now we have 9 periods in our day, but to make the periods any longer, you would have to reduce that. You can achieve that in a number of ways, doing alternating days or a rotating drop where a class might meet 4 out of 5 days, for instance. Lunch. Currently, we assign lunch as a full period. Students get a lunch either period 4, 5, 6, or 7. Again, there's different options there about embedding it into another period. Many schools have moved to a common lunch. There's a lot of research about the positive impact on school culture with a common lunch. There are some challenges here. Again, we look at all of the unique aspects of Eastchester in this work. A common lunch for us might be a little tricky given the size of our cafeteria and food service. We're not too proximate to a lot of eating establishments. If you think about Bronxville High School, for instance, you're a walk from 17 different restaurants, pizzerias, and delis. So we could also pull on homeroom. Again, currently it's 13 minutes prior to first period. That was very clear early on, something that we felt was unnecessary, that it was quite a bit of wasted time, and there was a lot of agreement in the committee on looking at that. And then the last is extra help. Again, currently it's daily, 30 minutes after school. I won't go through these too much, but we reviewed a number of different scheduling models. The traditional one that we have, block scheduling, where you have 80 or 90-minute periods that meet every other day. The modified block schedule, which incorporates elements of both. It's kind of a midpoint between a traditional and a true block. So your periods may not be as long, a little bit longer, maybe about 50 minutes in length. There's certainly been some momentum in our group about that as well. The last two there, flexible scheduling and hybrid models, are really tough to achieve in a public school of this size. Those are more likely to be utilized at independent schools and day schools, that sort of thing. And then I think this is really important. These were the norms that we established very early on, and it helps us keep students at the center of the work. There's a lot of other factors there, but if we are thinking about students in every conversation and every decision that we make, I think that we're in a good place. So engagement, wellness, and equity, certainly there's a desire to have more teacher collaboration. And then, of course, we need to consider the impact on the community in terms of extracurriculars, family obligations, and other needs. So I'm going to turn it over now to Brian, who's going to talk a little bit about the conversations that emerged out of that first meeting, and then review some of the teacher survey data with you as well.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. All right, so thank you, everyone. As we start to look at the priorities and the challenges and the benefits of looking at a modified schedule, especially starting next year, I want to think back on some of the words that Chris has used to describe the committee itself. We're going to assess, identify, discuss, and consider. And when he says that this has been a collaborative effort, I mean, working with Mr. Welsh, with Ms. LeBou, with Dr. Meyer, Dr. Valenti has been part of some of these conversations. It's been a great experience, not only to work with the administrators and the teachers who are on the committee, but to hear from the students as well. And I think that it's been extremely beneficial for me personally to hear from students as a part of this process. So I want to commend everyone involved with this committee and getting this off the ground. So when you start to look at the challenges, what do we currently have? We have a 9-period day, 40-minute periods. One of the challenges that we've seen along the way is that getting students from class to class and getting the most out of those periods can be a challenge. We have a 3-minute passing time that's been built into our schedule. I don't know how many years ago the schedule was built, but in looking at feedback from parents, from students, and from teachers, that's one thing that we have assessed along the way is kind of what can we do with the passing time. Another piece of this is what Chris was talking about with the idea of LADIC learning, authentic problem-based learning, the use of technology in our instructional time. How can we kind of maximize those efforts as we bring the school district into that 21st century learning environment that we all are a part of today? And then also, when we start to look at some of the wellness initiatives and some of the mental health initiatives and some of the non-instructional programming that we do, if we're going to bring in outside programs and if we're going to build the school community, sometimes within the current structure, there's not as much flexibility. There's not as many opportunities to kind of break free of that 9-period day and schedule some of those events. So that's another piece of what we're kind of looking at as one of the challenges under our current structure. So as we look ahead to the next, year or two, what do we want to see? What do we want to build? What do we want to benefit from with this new schedule? Well, one piece is that idea of school culture. How do we build that level of inquiry that we want to see in our students? What do we want students to graduate from Eastchester having at their disposal? How are we going to provide students with the support that they need? Whether that's through mental health initiatives, or whether that's through extra help, or whether that's through building comprehensive schedules for them to find academic success. Another priority for us is that sense of electives. When you look at the high school structure, we have one of the most robust elective programs that we have. We have an excellent business department. We have electives in social studies and art and music and English and math and science courses. So how do we maintain what we have from the elective standpoint, and how do we give all students the opportunity to participate in those electives? How do we maintain the number of classes students are able to take? Obviously, if you have a 9-period day, you can take 8 periods and have a lunch. Some students, very few these days, will go to a 9-period day, but how do we build a schedule that's going to allow them to still maximize their academic portfolio as they graduate and look on to colleges? As Chris mentioned, the work around LADIC and problem-based inquiry, problem-based learning, that's something we absolutely want to maintain in our new model. Something that sometimes I think is overlooked in some ways, our excellent BOCES program. The fact that we have both an AM and a PM BOCES program that our students can attend, we want to make sure that we maintain that for our learners moving forward, that we give them those opportunities to extend their days beyond the Eastchester program and still take full advantage of what BOCES has to offer. I think that's something I would say is extremely important as we look ahead. And then when you look at kind of one of the benefits that we're kind of working with along the way is the consideration of, not only where we fall, but where does everyone else fall? What are other schools doing? I think you're going to hear tonight from Ms. Riley about several of the other schedules that we have. We had talked at one point about a traditional block schedule, and in our investigations, we see that some districts are actually moving away from that. They find that to be a little bit too restrictive, in fact. So it was something that we kind of saw along the way, and we want the best of everything. So as we look ahead, it's something that we have to kind of consider is what have other districts tried and are they happy with it? And again, I think we looked at numerous, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but many examples of other programs and what they have to offer and, kind of where the benefits might fall for us. So when you start to look at this idea of flexibility with structure, really what we're talking about here is the ability to create a framework that allows for change while still providing clear expectations and guidance for those who are involved. So when you think about flexibility, it allows us to respond to changes in circumstances, needs, or feedback. So when we go through some of the survey results, there may be things that we've adjusted based on surveys from parents, surveys from students, surveys from faculty. There are things that we have discussed that we have considered from all of those stakeholders along the way. And as we work through this planning phase, the structure helps us prioritize, plan, and measure our work. Having those timelines, having the schedule that Chris has discussed has really guided a piece of what we've been working with. And when you look at the various stakeholders that have been involved, the whole idea is providing those goals for us, providing the processes that have kind of guided the work that we have done here. So as you look at the teacher survey, there are a couple of things that kind of jump off right away from the start. You look at the blue color coded, it says not well at all, red is for somewhat well, and the yellow or orange is very well. The question was, how well does the current schedule accommodate the following? And when you look at the data, what you'll see is that staff is fairly happy in some ways, but not all. When you look at the idea of academic instructional time, we feel that our current schedule serves that very well. When you look at the idea of student engagement and the attention span, the 40-minute periods we feel has worked fairly well. But I think you look at some of the concerns that were raised. Those include the scheduling electives. Those include the support for student wellness, which is breaks within the school day as well as a lunch period. Those were questions that we have with the current schedule. And the idea of teacher preparation and planning. And what that doesn't necessarily mean, teacher preparation and planning, is simply putting together your daily lesson plans. What that includes is vertical alignment. How do we build from 9th grade to 10th to 11th to 12th? It includes horizontal alignment when you consider the experiences that students have across the board in any given grade, 9, 10, 11, or 12. That includes time for collaborative pairs to meet together within the school day and work and kind of work on their students and what their lesson plans are going to look like and how we reach all of our learners. So those were some of the areas that, we kind of felt maybe the current schedule was less than ideal. Guidance programming, when you look at SEL pieces, that's another area where we felt as though we do a somewhat okay job. It's somewhat well. What that means is it's fair. And we don't want to necessarily settle for fair. And then obviously the after-school programs and services, sports, extracurriculars, the students will touch on that a little bit later, but it's interesting to note that our staff, was a little bit split on that one as well, going what are we actually offering and can we make it better for our students? When you look at the next chart, this has to do with which areas we believe need improvement. It's safe to say when you look at this survey, which was done in November, very at the beginning of this process, one of the things that we saw was that the frequency of class meetings was something that was a little bit lower on the totem pole or the hierarchy of needs for us. The time for teacher collaboration was a large concern for us, followed by the length of class periods and the extracurricular scheduling. I think those are some pieces that were addressed through the work that we've done in our meetings. And then when you start to look at the question that was posed to the staff about the survey.
Excuse me?
Yes.
I think we just have a
No,
quick question.
And I don't know if you guys want us to hold, this is a awesome presentation. It's very meaty. There's a lot of
Sure.
slides here. I don't know if you want us to hold them until the end or if as you guys are going through the sections, if it's okay, I didn't mean to
No, that's good.
interrupt. So question for you,
As they come up.
around the teacher survey.
Sure.
What was the pool of teachers that were offered the survey and how many responded?
That's a great question. Chris, do you want to?
Yeah, so it was sent to the high
Sent to the high school.
teachers, all of them.
How many is that?
About 80.
80.
And we had a little less than 50% response rate.
Got it.
Yep.
So we had less than 50% response rate from the teachers in terms of the survey. And if I'm interpreting this correctly, Brian, as you were going through kind of the first with the 3 buckets, not well at all, somewhat well, or very well, just to understand where some of the deficiencies were.
Correct.
Well, actually, I think it's less than 50, right? Because now this slide says 35 responses. So 35 teachers out of 80 responded to this survey. Is that right?
This item, you know,
This
not
per-
everybody.
So
responded.
more teachers could have responded to the first question
That's
versus the last, so.
Correct.
Okay, so you had some drop off. So in that first slide, if we're identifying this as not well at all, somewhat well, or very well, from the teachers that responded, they felt like we were doing well in everything.
Right.
Across the board with the current schedule.
Correct.
I just want to make sure okay.
Yes, and again, I think this survey was done honestly in November as we started the process to start gathering our information. And I think you kind of have to take into account a little bit of the fear of the unknown, you know, when you look at a survey like this.
That's exactly what I was
yes,
going to ask. And
correct.
I think, you know, look, as we are on this journey, and clearly you have a fantastic committee looking at this, change is difficult, and affecting change is always hard because the unknown is a little bit there.
Yep.
But I think, you know, as you guys are going through this, and I know we're going to get to kind of the student survey, et cetera, but I just think so everyone at home that's watching understands, and the folks that are here, one of the goals for this board was to take a look at the secondary schedule to figure out, you know, Chris, as you said in the very beginning, what are we missing for our students? Because we know what we hear from parents, what we're hearing from students, even just out of coffee and conversation with the high school, we're clearly missing something, and all roads led back to the confines of the existing schedule, right? So in looking at the survey, I just want to point out, there's always a critical, I'm a data person, there's always a critical mass with the survey. I always would love to see 100% participation in a survey, especially with a confined group that, you know, if there's 80 teachers, they're all going to live with this. Would have loved to have seen 78 or 79, but I understand that. So as we're going through it, and again, I'm, you know, somewhat stating the obvious, affecting change is difficult, changing is difficult, but clearly we need to make some type of a change, which is what you guys are talking about tonight.
And I think one of the things that's been interesting as we've gone through these meetings is that as the committee work was undergone and as we kind of picked up steam with this, we got more and more anecdotal evidence from the staff as word kind
great.
of, you know, got out about what we were considering in other districts. I think it was our last meeting, there were several teachers who spoke about their home districts. And well, this is what I'm seeing with my kids. And I think that's something that may not show up in the survey. But I think that's something that is definitely, I just want to reassure the board and the public, a huge part of what we've talked about. Is
That's great.
branching out and
You
getting-
know, Heather, I
has
see
a-
you're up there next to Brian.
To jump in with a point, because you raised a great point there, and I think that this has been a learning year for us.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people may have responded a certain way in November because change is a little intimidating, and
Sure.
because they didn't necessarily know how many other great options there are. But as we have learned, each week that goes by, each new piece of information that we have, sometimes I think some of these impressions are changing. That's what I'm hearing from teachers, certainly, that maybe they were very happy with the things they were having in this moment, but now they can compare it to other possibilities. So it's a great learning experience for all
That's
of us.
great, and thank you for that. And I would just say, I think, you know, and Heather, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe it was 2 summers ago, we were at a workshop retreat that Dr. Valenti put together, and one of the things that specifically came out of the guidance department was there wasn't enough time in the existing schedule. So, you know, again, I think change is a continuum. It's not easy to do, but clearly we need to do something. And I think as you guys are going through this and more formalizing how we're going to affect change here, keeping the students at the center of that is very important. And also knowing, you know, with data and surveys, there's a very fine line between analysis paralysis and doing something. And I think from our view, we look at it as who's the student body that's going in, which class is going to be impacted by the positive change, and how can we collectively, with the support of the Board of Education, obviously, what do you guys need to affect that change sooner rather than later in the least disruptive way possible for the staff, students, parents, et cetera, so.
And that's where I think when you hear from the student responses a little bit, I think it's going to be interesting to see kind of where their answers fall, because I think, and that's why I was kind of grinning as I was going through some of this, is
Right.
because, you look at it and you say, as you started on this voyage at the beginning of the school year, the idea of where this was going to land, I think, there's that natural inclination to go, no, we like what we have. But I think what the survey did do was it highlighted some of those areas of, in which we can make that improvement. Yeah, so I think that was a great point. No, absolutely.
So.
Yeah, sure.
Oh,
Matt, just, I have a note here from when I was coming back on, and I was actually starting with, again, change, people feel they're losing something. No matter what,
Right.
any change, it feels like something is being taken away because it's different. So initial hesitance or wanting to learn more is completely normal and something that we'd expect in conducting surveys of all stakeholders, and certainly that played out in some regard. I think what you'll see from the students, and then when I talk about the parent survey, is the qualitative data was really exceptional and thoughtful.
and Chris, when you do get to the student survey, what was their control? I mean, if you're asking a regular high school student, how would you change the schedule? What are they comparing that to?
We weren't asking them how they would change the schedule. We asked them about components of the existing schedule.
Okay. Thank you.
And Heather can talk a little bit about the schedules.
This is my 19th year at Eastchester High School, and the schedule that we currently have was in existence before I arrived. I'm not sure for how many years. So I'm very excited that we are taking this time to do such thorough research.
Thank you. That's an awesome data point for everyone to hear. You've been here for 19 years, and this was the schedule when you got here. Thank you.
So as part of our research, we reviewed schedules that are used in 6 area schools. Our goal was not to copy these schedules, but we wanted to learn from them. We focused on what strengths existed in each of these schedules, what aspects of these schedules could we incorporate into our school, and what aspects of these schedules would not necessarily work for us. This is a list of the schools that we included, and we chose them because they were each unique in some way. We wanted to review different factors that we could analyze in terms of their effectiveness and their suitability. Many very interesting topics came up. We talked about rotating schedules, varying number of days per cycle, lengths of periods, rotating the lengths of the periods, many different ways to structure lunch periods and incorporate things such as support, an activity period, an advisory period. And I think this was really important because the experience of our committee members and the faculty as a whole really varied in terms of what knowledge did they have about schedule options. So it was very necessary research and really opened our eyes to so many different possibilities.
Heather, can I ask just a couple of really quick questions about the schedules we reviewed? I'm sorry for all my questions, but this is super important stuff. How did we determine that these were the districts that we wanted to review the schedules? And when we say we reviewed the schedules of these districts, did we just get a schedule? Did we talk to someone there? Did we talk about pros, cons? If you could speak a little bit to the process of that and why we settled on these particular ones,
I
would
can
be
talk
awesome.
about it.
Okay.
So again, I think Heather mentioned the fact that they're unique. So, there's 8, 10, 15 schools that we could find in Westchester that all have very similar schedules. These ones had some unique distinguishing factor that made it a more comprehensive review and allowed us to consider different aspects of the schedules. So for instance, Croton Harmon, they have some periods one day are 50 minutes, the next day they're an hour and 20 minutes. Horace Greeley has an 8-day cycle. They have a block for activity period. They have one day where they do a late start for wellness. So each of these schedules has something really unique. And what we're doing in analyzing those schedules, and I'm happy to come back in the spring and talk about, our processing of them further and any potential schedules we develop for Eastchester that makes sense. But I think at this point, we're still trying to, in full candor, I've been here 6 months. I am still trying to determine exactly what the existing program is lacking that needs to be addressed through the schedule. And I agree with you, we need a schedule change. Like, the purpose of this presentation is not to say we do not.
Yep.
So I'll get back to it.
It's coming shortly. Let's move it along, folks.
Of course,
Bottom line.
yes.
No pressure. Yeah.
I'll just make a few more points. So not all of the schedules that we reviewed would really work in our unique community. So we wanted to take time and have real discussions and identify areas that we wanted to preserve from our current schedule, because there are some valuable pieces there, and then take some aspects that we like to incorporate into our schedule. And I'll just highlight a couple of the points. I know we've already mentioned it tonight, but it's so important I have to say it again. We really feel that it's important that our students have enough time in the day that they can take electives. It is something that we are very, very proud of at Eastchester High School. We have an extensive variety of electives, and that's something we want to make sure to find a way to maintain. Another area, as Brian mentioned before, are students who attend the Career and Technical Program at Southern Westchester BOCES. Since they do have an AM and a PM session, we need to be mindful in making sure that our academics can fit with their experience there. We had extensive conversations about lunch periods. We do have some students right now who forgo a lunch period to take 9 classes, but that's something that concerns us in terms of their wellness. It's not something that we necessarily want to continue. So we tried to really keep that in mind as we explored some creative options for scheduling lunch. We definitely agreed across the board that the current length and timing of homeroom is not effective, and that is something that we need to take a serious look at. We spent also a significant amount of time discussing extra help. We see there are limitations with extra help at the end of the day, and thought that we would benefit from moving it to the beginning or the middle of the day. We did find area schools that have it at the start of the day, which we wanted to strongly consider. Still, has some challenges to it, but that was something we felt worth spending time investigating. Whereas having it during the day, we found might have too many obstacles. There were concerns about how we would manage 900 students in an unscheduled block of time. We also wanted to look into things such as incorporating professional learning time, or the possibility of an activity or a club period. One thing that really interested us that we want to spend more time focusing on is the idea of rotating periods. And what teachers were saying often is that they're feeling that the experience of a student in first period versus, let's say, fourth period is a very different energy level, and they'd like to find a way to rotate that. But then we were concerned, how will we do that with the BOCES AM and PM session? And then we realized we actually could do this by having a morning rotation and an afternoon rotation. So really, I feel that the more time we spent learning, the more possibilities we saw. And we've had so many wonderful, meaningful conversations so far, and we'll continue to have them as well. But I would really love right now to introduce 2 students that have dedicated time to our schedule exploration process. We have Yale and Eva with us, and they're going to share data that was gathered through a student survey.
Hello guys, how are you doing? My name is Yale, this is Eva, and we're going to talk about the student survey data that was collected from grades 9 through 11, which is who this schedule change is most likely going to impact the most. And as you see, we got 505 responses, 432 from grades 9 through 11, which is a substantial portion of the amount of students that are currently in those grades.
And as you can see, we have here that 75% of students say that the current schedule supports their academic success well or very well, which, as we've stated a countless amount of times, change is scary. So lots of people right now, they're looking at the schedule and they say, oh, it works, but they don't really know what a different schedule would look like.
So for an increase of class period length, one of the bigger concerns that students have is attention span, because as you know right now, students use a lot of social media, and a lot of it is short form content, and that does shorten attention spans. And having, say, 80, 70 minute periods, that would decrease attention span, and it would decrease productivity within classes, and therefore decrease learning.
And then there's also a pretty like mixed response to having classes not meeting every day. I know some people like that idea because they think, oh, I'm gonna have more time to focus on just a set amount of classes each day. But there is also the concern that there's gonna be more homework as you now have an extra day to do this homework. And then there's also the issue that maybe students are gonna forget some things and how is testing gonna work. But right now it's pretty mixed. Some students want it, some students don't really want that.
So a lot of students also voice the concern of having an extra help period. Currently, we have extra help after school from 2:26 to 2:55. However, some people take the bus, which leaves during this extra help period, and otherwise they would have to wait for the 3:30 late bus, which doesn't really fit into everybody's schedule. So people would like to see either during the day or, as we're going to discuss later, maybe before the day, and using homeroom for that purpose.
And as an extra note too, some students, when they have sports after school, it's hard to make time for extra help, sports and clubs. And I know lots of students are focusing on their resume, trying to build up all the extracurriculars, all the sports, so it's hard to fit everything in. And then as for rotating periods, we do have some negative feelings towards that, just because there is the idea that a set schedule, you get used to it, you know what you're going into, but rotating periods, it's something new every day, and it's like different, so you can't really adapt to that. But there is also the idea that rotating periods will help you be more alert, because there's times of the day where everyone is more alert. Some classes you're just more focused, and so rotating the periods will give you more focus to different teachers.
So here's the student survey, some qualitative data. So the first main thing is people think that the schedule is good. The 40-minute periods are effective for teachers to teach and for students to learn. But with the increase in size of the building since the institution of this schedule, people think that the passing time between periods is not enough. Currently, 3 periods is what we have, but to travel from, say, gym to the science hall, which is what the longest travel distance that people usually make, people can't really make it in time. So gym teachers have to excuse kids early, cutting into gym period, and science classes have to start a little bit later because students usually end up in science late. So we want to increase this by just a little bit to allow better passing time and for students to kind of unwind a little bit.
And then lots of students also wish clubs started earlier because, as we've said before, sports start at 3 and clubs start at 3, so it's hard to make time for both. I mean, at least for me, I know when I want to go to clubs, it ends up cutting into workout time, so there's kind of like a running joke on the team that I'm always late, but that's because I'm trying to fit in clubs and sports. And so if we started clubs earlier, maybe not necessarily 2:30, but 2:40, as you'll see, this would allow people to go to clubs for 20 minutes and then go to their sports and also have a little bit of time for extra help.
Yeah, and most sports, they practice every day. So having a earlier club period would really help.
And then some students would be worried about the amount of homework that would pile up. This is more so for block scheduling, where your classes aren't meeting every day. Because some students feel that, oh, if I'm not meeting every day, that means that I'm going to get an extra day of homework. So that would be something that we'd have to address if we do switch to block scheduling.
Thank you.
Thanks,
guys. Awesome. So again, I'll go through the parents survey relatively quickly. Again, no surprise. Support for what they know, what is not foreign. But that was in the initial question. But when you go through some of their other responses, it became clear there is an openness and a willingness to engage in a change process that's thoughtful and strategic. So a couple of qualitative data points that I think is important. I'll look at the second one, block scheduling. As a parent of a student who went through this, absolutely love the idea. They get so much more out of it. It also prepares them for college. Multiple feedback points from parents also about students not having time to stop at lockers, needing another minute or so in between classes. There was a significant amount of feedback about a later start time related to student sleep patterns. Again, that's not in our purview, nothing we were looking at, given the, as we talked about, the contractual obligations, the busing as well. You have a thoughtful response here, rotating periods. This would benefit classes consistently in the early spots, so the circadian clock would impact more than just the traditional first periods of the day. A lot of feedback around this kind of sweet spot of periods in between 50 or 60 minutes in length. Again, another one about the early start time. And then we had a couple of really thoughtful responses from community members who are educators, talking about their schedules at their schools. This one here, in favor of a drop schedule. The experience includes a model where 2 periods are dropped each day. This is the model that I'm familiar with at Scarsdale. And then another one here about a 10-day rotating double block drop. So let's just get to it. You know, I know it's been a lot of data. I think what we wanted to show you is that we value the stakeholders in this process. To have this process be successful, we need the entire community and all stakeholders be a part of it. So what we did in creating what I'll call a bridge schedule, knowing that this work will continue, but trying to honor the work from last year and reflect some of the data that we've received through our surveys, was a few things. So first, we tried to address the extra help by splitting extra help in morning and afternoon. We have students arrive here on buses as early as 7:20 in the morning. Our cafeteria is full of students at 7:20, but our teachers aren't here for any extra help to be available to them. So the idea would be to split extra help between AM and PM. AM extra help would be a little bit longer. You know, another benefit of this, besides the idea of students coming off the bus and being available for that extra help, is you could potentially be a student with 3 touch points with your teacher in the same day. If you had a math homework the night before you had questions on, you could come in the morning, get some questions about math help, participate in the lesson, and then close the circle in the afternoon with more extra help. We'd also have extra help, and then at 2:40, which would allow us to have club meetings begin at that time, with athletics still beginning at 3 o'clock. So that voice from students about not being able to participate in clubs and athletics, we tried to honor that as well. You'll notice that homeroom is reduced from 13 to 3 minutes. That provides us plenty of time for our morning announcements as they are currently conducted. Passing time moved from 4 minutes between each period instead of 3. You know, based on the feedback from students and parents, we thought it'd be wise to give a little more for passing. Again, there was reference to the fact that when the original schedule was created, the building footprint was much different. Trying to get from down in the gym to some of our chemistry classrooms in 3 minutes at this point is certainly difficult. That's one piece of the schedule. That's the more daily piece. But what I think is more exciting and is our way of trying to get at and honor the advisory piece without, at this point, having a mechanism to build it into the day, is to identify 6 to 8 special programming days a year. So once a month or once every 6 weeks, we would have a schedule designated for special programming days. We'd block out 90 minutes in the middle of the day for programming. These could be assemblies, guest speakers, school-wide discussions, social emotional learning workshops, college and career counseling sessions, the implementation of school-wide programs. You know, for instance, upcoming assemblies we have here at the high school. We have on Thursday, weather permitting, a hang up and drive assembly for 11th and 12th grade students. That's something we'd like to see annually implemented for all 11th grade new drivers about driving safety and certainly putting the phone down while driving. You know, we have the Westchester County DA's office coming in March to talk to us about hate crimes, you know, and the impact that some of the actions that take place in the school and in the community have on the community as a large. And then later in the spring, we have an elected officials assembly. So these are all things that we would be able to embed on these special programming days. You know, we're also looking at becoming what, through the Anti-Defamation League, a no place for hate school. That's work that would have to take place starting next year. At this point in the year, they're not taking any new schools. What is also exciting about these special programming days is that we could designate them before the year and say, these are the 6 or 8 special programming days, and then we could essentially pilot different bell schedules on those days. So you know it's a special programming day, you know it's going to be a different schedule, you know we have 90 minutes in the middle of the day for programming. Let's have one of those days be 50-minute periods. Let's have one of those days be 60-minute periods, and you can try different things as part of this process. So that's what we have now. Again, we tried to incorporate and address extra help, advisory through the special programming days, passing time, and homeroom for sure. So that's what we have there. I'll allow any members, if you want to talk about the schedule itself, or I can talk a little bit about next steps in terms of this idea of plan, do, act, and study. Certainly there's more planning and collaboration for us to do this year, and we'd be happy to come back towards the end of the year to report on our progress. Next year would consist of the do and study portions of the process, and we're hopeful to be ready to act on a transformational new schedule for the 26-27 school year. Yep. Thank you.
Good evening. I just had a piece that it's really been a pleasure to work with the committee. Ryan and I have participated in working closely with the high school team, and I anticipate also positive buy-in from the staff at the middle school, and this is something that we could easily transition to and continue to implement the programs we already have at the middle school. Thank you.
Could we go back to the schedule itself?
By all means.
Yeah. I want to first of all thank Chris, Madeline, and the committee. Let's give them a big round of applause. From a contractual point of view, the board needs to understand that the workday for the teacher is now 7:30, as you can see, to 2:40. So contractually, a teacher is obligated to work 7 hours and 10 minutes. That is their contractual day. So all teachers will be available at 7:30 for extra help. At the end of the day, to be honest, students still leave at 2:26 to meet their buses, and students are free to stay at the end of the day, and teachers, again, would be available in their classrooms as their assignment. So I wanted to stipulate this conforms to the teacher contract, which had been a question raised. Further, I want to stipulate that teachers starting at 2:40, which is the end of their workday, may collect stipends and/or any other emoluments that are associated with advisorships, et cetera. So there would be no conflict of interest there. The workday is ended, and at 2:40, that's their time. So if I'm a chess advisor or if I'm a whatever advisor, I could earn my stipend until 3 o'clock or beyond. We're not restricting the advisory period to solely 20 minutes, but we're allowing athletes at least to be part of that advisory effort, and then if they have to leave for a practice or a game, that advisory meeting may continue, but at least the athletes had an opportunity to be part of it. So I wanted to be sure that the structure was clearly understood on the record as being not only better for students, as the committee pointed out, but also conforms to our contract. And it does, in effect, extend the length of the student day, because, in effect, when you look at that, you're adding 20 minutes in the morning, which would be added to 8 times 40, which is 320. So right there, you're at 330 minutes. So you're meeting the minimum set by the commissioner's regulations of 5.5 hours. And then beyond that, you do have available to students time in period 9, and you're able to, time in that extra help, and you're still doing that by giving extra minutes to passing time. So this does accomplish a lot of, as Chris pointed out, small changes, but in the course of history here in Eastchester, I think it's been more than 19 years we've had this schedule. I know in talking to the former high school administration, they inherited it, so that makes it more than 20 years. So I think this is a major departure from what we've had for a very long time.
Thanks. I have a quick question. So the 7:30 to 7:50 time slot, is that optional, or do kids have to be in school at that time? So how is that?
Students must be in school, either in extra help or at other assigned locations. Is that correct, Mr. Welch?
Yeah.
Because we have to be careful about not having students in school at that time.
Well, currently they start at 7:47. So
Right.
we have the buses arriving at 7:20 now. So if you're riding a bus, you're already here. So no, it would not be a required 7:30 start. If you did not need to access extra help on a given day, you would be required to report for homeroom at 7:50 a.m.
Instead of 7:47.
Correct.
Which exists right now.
Yes. Ours is 7:47 for the first period. Teachers are 7:45.
But if students are not there, then does that still meet the length of the school day requirement if they're not present?
Well, now we just took 20 minutes off. You're below the commissioner's regulations.
Yeah.
You have a problem.
So,
Houston, we have a problem.
so effectively, in looking at this, the extra help now is optional in the morning, but the actual school day is gonna start at 7:50. We increase the time in between classes from 3 minutes to 4 minutes. And then after 2:26, from 2:26 to 2:40, that PM extra help is also optional.
Right.
Correct.
So effectively, what was done in this schedule is, we took time from the extra help being optional at the end of the day and moved that into the beginning of the day and split it into two.
Correct, because we had buses most leaving at 2:26. So we have the students, if you ride the bus now, this year, you're arriving here at 7:20. Most students that are leaving on the bus at 2:26, they're not accessing extra help at all in any capacity. So in this model, the students that ride the bus in the morning can access the extra help. If they need to leave at 2:26 to pick up a sibling at school or a job, whatever it may be, they can do that. And if you're a student who doesn't ride the bus, you can certainly still come early, but you have the late window for extra help as well. Or if you're really so inclined and motivated, you can access both of them.
So it's optional extra help, right, in the morning hours and in the afternoon hours?
Yes.
But the school time effectively is going to be starting at 7:50? Is that
Yes.
correct? So we're losing 3 minutes with it starting now?
We're not
7:47?
We're not losing any because we reduced homeroom so much.
Yeah, understood. Okay, got that.
So we
Right,
still
right.
have 40-minute
Yeah.
periods, we still have 9, so the number of
Yeah.
instructional minutes is identical to
It's just
what we currently
reallocating. I
have.
understand.
So again, these were the kind of adaptive changes, the
Mm-hmm.
small fixes that we wanted to help address some of these issues now that we're proposing with more work for a more comprehensive change forthcoming.
But any student that wants to come to school early, not just the bus students, could it take an opportunity for morning help?
Absolutely.
And if they don't want to take an opportunity for morning help, they could still go to the cafeteria like they do today?
Correct.
I only am obligated to remind everyone here that the commissioner's regulations call for a certain amount of minimum minutes for a secondary school schedule. That is 5 hours and a half, 330 minutes. 8 and 9 times 40 is 360, but you're giving students a lunch period, so I can only use 8 periods times 40 is 320, and I only have a homeroom now of 3 minutes. Anything else cannot be counted under the regulations as instructional minutes. So I have to put that on the table for everyone to think about. Right now, we're showing 323 minutes. And I'd rather have that brought up here then brought up with a letter from the State Education Department. So I have to bring that to everyone's attention.
It's the same as current. The instructional time is the same as we have now.
No, but you see what you're changing is 7 minutes that you have now that you're not going to have next year if we follow this. Right now, your homeroom is allowable as instructional minutes under regulation. You're reducing that to 3. So your net reduction is 7 minutes in your current instructional day. And you have to maybe go back to the drawing board. I think there are fixes here.
Certainly have students that do take 9 periods.
Right, but that's the exception, you said.
And is part of that, Dr. Valenti, just so we can kind of wrap our heads around
Yeah.
it? The homeroom now is shortened by 3 minutes, and we're adding a
No,
minute.
it's shortened by 7 minutes
By
to
7.
3 minutes. Go ahead.
Plus, we're adding a minute in between classes for them to change, which is not instructional time either, right? So that adds into this.
Now, if you added the minute back into your instruction and took it away from moving, now you multiply 8 times 41. That could be your fix to get to your 3:30 minute.
Right.
But I'm not here to suggest that.
Yes.
I'm only here to tell you what the commission is
meeting
going to
it.
tell you in a less friendly way, obviously.
Got it.
All right.
That was the original proposal.
Yes, sir, but
41-minute period.
but if we give it to the move, I can't multiply 8 times 41 anymore. You see what I'm saying?
Passing time allowed?
Pardon me?
Does passing time count toward that required time?
You cannot count lunch, passing time as part of your instructional day. You may count your homeroom, the pledge and announcements under the regulation.
Which is why it was so long.
Well, yeah, useless, let's be fair.
I mean, let's, that's
I
what they were
mean,
doing.
you did a good thing by reducing it. The question is, where do you want to put those 7 minutes? And I'm saying you may need that to maintain your minimum instructional day. But I don't want to be the final arbiter. My job is simply to be an umpire here.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, I think the 4 minutes between classes sound great, but it sounds like that may not work for next year, maybe the following year, because then it's going to take away from instructional
Yeah, I mean,
time.
we could easily make those 41-minute periods and stick with the 3 minutes of passing. That was actually the original proposal.
Right, that's what
and
we
then
looked
had
at.
all of the feedback.
The student
Parents,
feedback.
Students
Yeah.
tried to honor it.
Yep, and I'm sure you guys are looking at all the options, and a ton of work went into this, and, I think this is a starting point, nothing is there. What I would say too is, I think, when there is another update, would love to hear, and not necessarily for tonight, but some thinking around, because I think this is a great start. To me, this is all optional to the student currently. It's, if you want to come early in the morning, if you want to stay after, you're gonna get this, right? And I think even last year, Chris, before you joined us, we looked at, and I had collected schedules from places like Iona and Ardsley, where they were looking at block scheduling. And one thing that was very noticeable to me was that extra help or that advisory period or whatever you want to define that as, from a committee, it was built into the day. So it wasn't optional. So I would say is, as we look at this, to talk through some of that and what that would look like, because, and again, we don't have to get into the numbers tonight, but for the kids that take the bus, 9th graders through seniors, they're there at 7:20. Would love to understand what percentage of them by grade actually take the bus versus come on their own. What does that population look like? 1, 2, in terms of staying after for extra help now, how many kids are actually opting to do that? I don't know the answer. So I think in one of the variations, and if it doesn't work for next year, I just think an understanding of why, because I'm sure there will be a why. I'm always from the school of, if you build it into the day and it's not optional, all of the kids are going to get more. So when we talk about, inclusivity and making sure that it's fair to everybody, What about, the kid that can't get a ride in the morning but doesn't take the bus? So I just want to make sure we're thinking through all those things.
We absolutely are, and, I appreciate your point. That's the idea of the lack of flexibility when you have a set 9-period
Yeah.
day. And I wish I could stand here before you and say that, we've been able to get to where we need to. But I've been trying to bring people along. I think Heather spoke a little bit to the education piece, and certainly incrementally, there's been more and more support for the work that we're looking at, long term. But, I've mocked things up on my own. So for instance, there's something that I'm playing around with that would have no one scheduled 5th period on Wednesdays. And then you can do with it what you would like, whether that's advisory, whether that's extra help, it's clubs, it's we can figure out what we put there, but just in terms of the rotations, and the positioning of things, that's something that I've kind of mocked out. It's just, it wasn't ready for tonight.
Fair enough. And again, I think good starting place for us to, continue the conversations. And I don't think it's definitely not lost on me that, as they say, the devil is always in the details. And bringing a large group of people along, that's challenging. And I think without knowing what the outcome is, it's a little difficult. And, hearing more about the surrounding school districts, and I think the understanding, and Heather, again, thank you for saying I've been here for 19 years, it's been the same schedule. I would love to see an option where it's not optional, but it's mandatory to benefit all of our students, and what that looks like. So perhaps we could have another workshop session at some point this year to kind of talk through pros, cons, why maybe the first iteration that's not possible, and maybe it's not.
I just want to say one comment, but I do feel, Mr. Welsh, from the importance of bringing people along the journey, learning as you go, right? Getting those anecdotal stories that you're hearing from other districts and kind of having that resonate. I mean, not that we want to, I think you said it, Matt, go through like an analysis paralysis and then we're here like 3 years later and we haven't really done anything. But I think incrementally, I think the more we're able to get folks to students, parents, teachers, kind of wrap their heads around this evolvement, I think the better off we'll be, and not just kind of, make it happen and it fail. The last thing we want is to have this fail. We don't want this to fail.
Yeah, in the ever wise words of Dr. Meyer, when you're hoping to adopt a schedule that's going to last 20 years or longer. So when you're thinking about that, it's a 2-year process for something that is going to sustain for many, many years. So you really want to do it in a thoughtful, deliberate, and as Matt said, consider all of the details.
Yeah.
And I just have to say, the special programming days that you're looking into, I think it's incredible. I mean, that there's a huge need in this district, and I'm glad to see you're trying to work something like that into the schedule. So, Chrissy?
I think this is a great start, and I hope that you guys can come back in the spring and tell us more about what schedules you're thinking of. Because we're not changing much for next year, and the extra help is optional, I love the special programming days. I personally would love to see that more than 6 to 8 times a year, once a month. If the kids had 10, I think that would be great, because we have so many recommendations from Tri-State that we're unable to do. And if they're not going to change the schedule next year, we're still talking about the following year. So as much of those special programming days as we can get in there, I think for social emotional learning, mental health, essay writing with the kids, more time with their guidance counselors. So that would be my request. I would like to see that once a month, because I think there's just not going to be a lot of change next year, and a lot of it is not going to be to the following year.
Yeah, and Chrissy, I will echo that. I think that's an amazing idea. I love the why in the beginning of the presentation. I'll just say that. And I think the fact that you brought along all the teachers and the students and everything is core to what we need to do. I think that what I would really like to see for the next work session would be, because I hear a lot of whys, we're probably not going to ever get a schedule that's going to solve for all of them. So perhaps our next surveys to our students and to our community members and parents and teachers could be narrowing down some of the options that solve for some of these whys and figure out which ones are the ones that we really think we need to prioritize, and then some scheduling options that fit that. Because I think the surveys are great, but perhaps when they are given options of 3 new schedules, they'll have a better sense of saying, oh, well, yeah, of course I like what we're doing right now, 9 periods, but actually that one sounds like it could be really cool because we're going to get X, Y, Z out of it. And that might really help them sort of open their mind to what they could get with why that scheduling is something that benefits us with options. And then that could be maybe how we narrow down which direction to go. And maybe in those once a month sessions, I loved your idea of testing out schedules. Maybe that gives us more ability to do that with certain ones that you've narrowed down that might work. So this was great and eye-opening. I think maybe some future thoughts on that would be great for next time.
Okay. So I want to thank the group again. I mean, they did a great job. I think these are many changes that we should, and we'll make the necessary adjustments and let you know what the next steps are, okay?
Thank you, Dr. Valenti.
Yeah, I think that does it, right?
It does. So we are at the future meeting dates. So our next regular Board of Education session is February 25th, followed by a March 11th work session. As I stated earlier, that this is a work session, so there will not be any public comment. And with that in mind, do I have a motion to adjourn? Sean, second. Jill, all in favor? All right, motion passes. Have a good night, everybody. Oops.